Welcome to Section 2 of Data Visualization Techniques. In Section 1, we focused on preparing our data in order to do effective data visualizations. In this section, we're going to focus more on the individual chart types where we can deploy those visualizations. So we're going to look at a variety of chart types and see how we can optimize them to be most effective. Anything from line and bar charts all the way through bullet graphs and box plots. And what we're going to cover in this section, we'll start with this introduction and then go into videos on line charts, followed by bar charts, dot plots, distribution plots, scatter plots, bullet graphs, and box plots. So let's begin with creating effective line charts. And why would we want to focus and create effective line charts? Well, to start with, a line chart is typically the most effective way to display time series data. It's not the only way, but it is going to be our go-to choice in probably 9 out of 10 cases for time series data. Line charts tend to be very easy. They make it easy for the audience to see trends, changes up or down, or cyclicality or seasonality patterns in the data. And from a practical standpoint, they're very easy to create in pretty much every charting software. And then line charts can also be used to compare data across multiple series within the same time series range. And we've got a couple of variations on the more basic line charts. Sparklines are a recent innovation from visualization guru Edward Tufte, and these are very useful, showing multiple series of small resolution data. And they have the added advantage of where you can adjust the axis to each data set so that the smaller values are not lost in the way they might be if they were plotted against a larger value. And then we've got small multiple line charts, also known as lattice charts within R. And here we can take smaller charts and put multiple instances on a single page, giving the viewer a lot of information in one place. So to summarize those points, the reasons we would spend time designing line charts is because they're a very effective tool for communicating time series data patterns to the user, and especially when there's a high degree of granularity where they're looking at many instances of months, days, even hours and minutes in some cases. So with that, let's look at some examples. Here we've got an extremely simple line chart. Data set of political contributions in the U.S. presidential election cycle of 2016. And we've got candidate Ben Carson, and we can see week by week the dollar values of contribution amounts, aggregate amounts that he's received. So simplest of all line charts. And as a viewer, we can see this generally upward trend for most of the year, peaking late in the year and then dropping way down in the last several weeks. And to get a little more information out of the chart, we could show a few other candidates. And one thing you may have detected is when we added some of the other candidates who had larger dollar values, the Hillary Clinton series, or in particular, the one very high week for Jeb Bush, those higher values have compressed the lower values into a very small space, and now it's difficult for us to see real trends in some of these lower value data sets. So we've got to have ways to address that, and one of those is through Sparklines, where, as I mentioned in the opening, that these can be made to scale within the individual data series. So for example, a secondary candidate such as Bobby Jindal is not having his axis scaled the same way as a larger candidate like Jeb Bush. So now we can see within the contributions for each candidate, what their respective trends are. So it gives us a lot of information in a small space, and Sparklines can also be paired up with text. That's one of the ideas. In that case, we would necessarily make this display not quite so wide. If we want to split it even further, we can then take the Sparklines, turn it into a small multiple chart by bringing in region in this case, or some other field that we use as columns. And now we can see region by region, candidate by candidate, what the patterns are over that same 3/4 of a year time series. So a lot of information here encoded in this single page. Users can then see what's interesting and take it further in their investigation. So to summarize line charts, generally we're going to look to use line charts when we've got time series data. That typically will be our starting point, particularly if we've got a huge number of data points. We can compare multiple data series fairly easily and effectively using line charts until we get into significant differences in scale, where we've got one series with very large values and other series with very small values. And at that point, Sparklines can be a very valuable addition to our toolkit, where we can do separate axes for each series. And then small multiples can combine some of the principles of Sparklines and bring in additional categorical variables. So we end up with this large matrix or trellis type of display where the user can see a huge amount of data in one place. In our next video, we're going to talk about building powerful bar charts.